What is up, guys? Welcome to my review of the newest take on Dracula, Last Voyage of the Demeter. And this is apparently like a adaptation of the chapter in Bram Stoker's original novel that talks about the captain log of the ship Demeter that got Dracula from Romania to, I believe, England. And this movie kind of slipped under my radar for a long time. I did most anticipated horror films for the rest of the year a couple of weeks ago and had a whole bunch of comments asking where this movie was. I had to do a little research. I had not even seen a trailer for this thing. I didn't know anything about it. And that usually goes one of two ways. Either it's a complete hidden gem like Cobweb was here very recently, or it's a movie where you watch it and you go, oh, well, yeah, I understand why they weren't advertising that very much. But I love vampire movies. I love Dracula movies. I've said it numerous times. I've been waiting for vampires and werewolves to have somewhat of a resurgence. It seems like over the past year or so, we're starting to get some of that, getting back to the horror roots, getting back to the classical stuff. The stench of Twilight is starting to dissipate away. And so I was really excited to see how gnarly, how dark, how brutal, how awesome this movie was actually going to be. But really quick before we sink our teeth into this movie, while Dracula has his own devices to keep his skin looking fresh and youthful, the rest of us have to use other means. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Geology. As I continue to get older, skincare becomes a growing concern, and it even becomes a bigger focus of my hygiene routine every single day. And the company that has helped me achieve my skincare goals faster and easier than anyone else is definitely Geology. Geology is a 24-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company with over 7,000 five-star reviews. And they create simple and effective skincare routines that are tailored just for you. Their products are built around just a handful of powerful proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades. Because at the end of the day, skincare is science and shouldn't feel like a gamble. Geology Skincare helps you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark and puffy under eyes, have smoother hydrated skin, and even target signs of aging. And now the best in the skincare game have expanded their reach into hair care and body care with co-washes, shampoos, conditioners, body washes, deodorants, and much more. My favorite of their newer products is the deodorants because I love the natural scents and the fact that they don't leave the white circles inside of my t-shirts, and I've really enjoyed using their new shampoos that genuinely leave my hair and scalp feeling clean, and I like the fact that you can actually see the natural ingredients on the front and don't feel like you're just rubbing your head with a bunch of chemicals. Just click the link in the video description and take their 30-second diagnostic quiz. Tell them about your skin and your goals, and a team of dermatologists will design a personalized routine just for you that is shipped directly to your door. And Geology is celebrating its 5-year anniversary by giving the biggest offer yet. Use my code CODY70 or scan the QR code on the screen and they will give you an exclusive 70% off of their award-winning skincare trial set. That's $50 in products for only $15. And on top of that, you can save big by getting up to 30% off of the add-on products of your choice when you add it to your trial. This is one of the best deals that you are going to find, so snatch it up before it's gone. Take charge of your skin, body, and hair today by using Geology. That's Geologie. And thank you to Geology for partnering with me on today's video. Starting off with the positives, I really enjoy period piece vampire films, especially when you're talking about the character of Dracula. You don't get very many period piece horror films anymore, especially within the vampire subgenre. And so whenever we do get something like this, to me, it's automatically just feeling a bit fresher than a lot of the things that we have gotten lately. The dialect in which people talk, the very limited technology to get rid of this evil and to survive this situation, the period piece detail as far as the production value and the costumes and everything. It's just a really cool experience when you get a director that goes for that era and actually nails it and does a really good job at bringing it to life. And I think that they did a really good job with that in The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I also like the very classical approach to Dracula himself. Dracula is in monster form this entire film. You don't see him switching forms. You don't see him shape-shifting into other people. It's basically Alien on a ship. I've seen that comparison a few times and it's very sound. You look at Ridley Scott's original film, a crew of people on a ship, there's this monster lurking in the dark, taking them out one by one, and by the end of it they go, oh fuck, we gotta get rid of this thing before it gets to civilization. That's essentially the setup you have here. Only instead of a xenomorph in space, it's Dracula in the sea. in the 1800s. And even the way that the movie explores the effects of vampirism and the motivations of Dracula and what happens when he bites somebody and they're left to their own devices. Again, very classical, kind of a minimalist approach that sometimes I appreciate. I don't think you always have to go bigger. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel and throw in all these crazy new modern rules. Sometimes simplicity is best, and I like the way that they approach that. Performances all across the board in this movie are really good. You have Corey Hawkins here, who I recognize most from the Straight Outta Compton movie where he played Dr. Dre, and he is really good in this one as your lead, as this doctor that is on this ship just trying to find some form of acceptance in this time period. You also have David Dastmalchian, who was kind of the standout to me because that guy slowly over the last number of years has really started to make a good name for himself. He's always been around, but he's always been in these minor roles, these little character roles. And for the most part, he's always playing these off-kilter characters. And this one, he's much more of kind of like the aggressive first mate character. He brings a lot of the attitude and a lot of the piss and vinegar to the movie, and I've never really seen him play that type of character, and he does really good here. You also have, I believe you pronounce it, Aisling Franciosi, and I have not seen her since The Nightingale, a movie that very well-made movie that I did not enjoy whatsoever. And she's kind of like your co-lead here to a certain degree. I won't get into the reasons her character is tied to Dracula, but she was a really interesting character and her performance was really good as well. And even the way that they wrote these characters, they could very easily have been one note, just regular old ship crew, and Dracula's there picking them off one by one. But they really do a good attempt at trying to give each one of them some standout signature characteristic that makes them differentiate amongst the rest of the crew, also trying to give them somewhat of a background, so fleshing out their character a bit to where you get to know them, you care about them for various reasons, which is important in a movie like this, otherwise they're just meaningless cannon fodder. And finally, I thought the movie was actually shot really well. This is all in one location, it's just on this ship, on the ocean, mostly at night with a fuckload of rain, and that can get very visually repetitive after a while, but they always find ways to shoot the ship and to shoot Dracula and to kind of frame out these tension-building scenes in a way that I didn't quite get fatigued with what I was looking at. And, you know, we'll talk about the runtime a little bit later. With a movie with this runtime with one location, that would be very easy of a problem to fall into. But the talent of the director and the cinematographer and everybody really is on show here. And I really like this director. He has shown in the past that he can do a lot with a very minimal amount of things to show. Like he did the Autopsy of Jane Doe, which was pretty much all just in a mortuary the entire movie. You got Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was a little bit more expansive, but again, very cool, creepy visuals on display in that movie. And this was another really good achievement on a directing standpoint from this guy. Moving on to the mixed, the score from this movie was actually composed by Bear McCreary, who is one of the best composers out there, and most times when I see his name, the score ends up easily being one of my positives. But I felt like it was almost too underutilized in the movie. There's moments where it really pops and it's a very good score, but there's not a lot of it. It's not very present in the movie in my mind. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact of the scenes that are here that need a score behind them, like the nighttime scenes where Dracula's on the hunt, or the third act when they're trying to stop Dracula. Like there's not a ton of that in the movie to where there would be this big triumphant present score, so it's not necessarily his fault, but to have a name like Barry McCreary on there, I wish that the thing would have stood out more than it actually does. Also in the mix is the design and the effects work on Dracula himself. Now there's a lot of practical work done in this movie, which I appreciate, but there's also a lot of digital, a lot of CGI. And there's scenes where, you know, Dracula, you can see like flying obscured with the fog and everything. That makes sense why you would have CGI and you would never complain about that. But there's also a lot of shots of Dracula himself that you can tell they're using a mix of practical and CGI. And I just hate seeing CGI in horror movies. I just genuinely hate it. I understand it's necessary sometimes, but for fuck's sake, if we could do it for the longest time in the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s without a bunch of computer-generated effects, why can't we just do that nowadays once in a while? Just give me every once in a while, every couple of months, give me a horror film with no fucking CGI shots, please. Just for me. Selfishly, I want that. It just takes the effectiveness down quite a bit for me when I can tell it's a computer-generated Dracula or vampire or monster or whatever it is. Like, it's supposed to be frightening, it's supposed to be intimidating, it's supposed to be really cool looking, and as soon as it looks really digital, I just get pulled out of it. And moving on to the negatives. This movie, unfortunately, didn't quite nail it for me. Like, there's a lot of things that I appreciate about it, and I'm glad that vampire movies are starting to have this trend and are starting to come back into pop culture, and we're getting more of these classical approach to things, but I felt like this movie was handcuffed by the fact that it was adapting a chapter of the Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, because everywhere that this movie is eventually going to go, story-wise, is already set in stone. We already know who's going to survive. We already know the fate of this ship and Dracula. And because of those parameters that unfortunately they're stuck with, I didn't feel like the movie had enough liberties to do a lot of interesting things with Dracula, or with just the vampire versus humans dynamic here. Like, it's a very wash, rinse, repeat, repetitive kind of structure to where you get all these people on this ship. Dracula eventually comes out of his little crate, and you have them all doing their ship shit during the day, and then the nighttime comes, and one crew member that you don't remember his name walks around, sees something obscured in the dark, and then eventually gets bit or gets taken, and then the next day they're like, where the fuck's Tom? What's this blood over here? I don't know, let's keep working. Oh, yeah. And it kind of sticks with that repetitive event for like the first hour of the film until they start to really figure out something nefarious is going on here. And even then, it doesn't really feel like the movie ramps up very much until the last 15 to 20 minutes when they're really trying to take down Dracula. And even then, it's not the most explosive third act. Now, this is not a movie that I expected to be this huge action spectacle or expected to be like a mile-a-minute pacing, but I do feel like the structure of the movie really makes a 2-hour runtime, which in today's climate is actually kind of a relief, feel too long for what they have to work with here. And a large part of that might even be the fact that they don't really do much of an attempt to bring any personality to Dracula. Like, Dracula is at his most animalistic, to where he's just this monster on the ship. You get a couple of lines of dialogue throughout the film, but beyond that, there's not really any human element to it. There's not any kind of like motivation there, or some kind of like a cunning plan that we see Dracula unfolding throughout the movie. There's no interactions with any of the humans that he's taken on. It's just this bat that keeps coming in and out and taking people with it. And that's cool, that's different, and it's effective at times, but it also leaves you with a central villain that just doesn't stand out as much as the character of Dracula should, very easily. And my final negative, there's an attempt here to give the Corey Hawkins character a background, and again, I appreciated the attempt that they did for all of the characters to give them a little bit more meat on their bones and give them some depth, and for the most part it works, but there's a scene where he basically gives a speech about how his life is within the time period that they're setting this movie in. That's very historical accurate, and it's given him a bit of an extra motivation of why he is trying to triumph over certain things in that historical time period. And I never felt like that matched with his whole goal of taking down Dracula by the end. Like, there's times where you get a movie where what's going on internally with the character very much is symbiotic and attaches itself very well to the external conflict that character is going through, and I felt like there was a disconnect there that could have very easily have been mended. It would have made the third act even more impactful for me. So overall, guys, I thought this movie was fine. It was okay. I would recommend it if you are a vampire whore like I am and you've been waiting for vampire movies. If you like the more classical approach that this movie is going for, period piece horror films, you're probably really going to enjoy it. I just wish the movie did more with its concept with a 2-hour runtime, because for me, it was just a bit too repetitive, a bit too wash, rinse, repeat. And because of that, I feel like a lot of people are probably gonna walk out of this thing thinking that it was a little bit boring. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. I'm also gonna put the 31 on 31 Vampires vs. Werewolves edition, Creatures of the Night, for you to check out. 31 vampire and werewolf movies ranked together. Like, share, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.